Welcome to Ravi Unites Schools, a real-time audio-video interaction. I'm really excited today. We have two IB schools, International Baccalaureate schools, who I both had the pleasure to become acquainted with when I gave a speech at the International Baccalaureate Global Summit in Global Conference in San Diego just this past summer. So it's really great that we can come together because we are spanning the Pacific Ocean. We have from Huntington Beach, California, we have the Ocean View High School, and on the eastern shores of the Pacific Ocean, there they are, and all the way on the west in Japan. I guess you guys are not on the ocean, right? You're inland in Japan, in Nagano, Japan. We have the UWC Isaac School. You know, the U.S. and Japan, good allies, but we're enemies at one time as well. So we're crossing some interesting cultural bridges. And then today in the United States is a pretty important day, right? It's election day. And we might just start by greeting our friends in Japan by saying hello in Japanese. Anybody know how to do that? Konnichiwa? Can we say konnichiwa? Konnichiwa.
Hi, I'm James. And so my question is, what have you heard about American schools?
I have a personal connection with people in the U.S. Two of my cousins are studying in a very good state high school in New Jersey. And from their experience, what I know is that it's rather a flexible system. So you actually get to choose courses and move around, which is similar to what we have here. At the same time, they have different levels of subjects. So for example, if you're super good at math, you could actually excel at that. And you are also kind of obliged to take courses outside of academics, which is good because, as you mentioned, it actually brings about more rounded students, which is interesting because they feel that they have multiple opportunities throughout their life in high school.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives in LA, and she goes to a state school in the US. And yeah, she really enjoys it because she used to go to a public school in Italy where the system is really like systematic and closed. Like you cannot really do any changes, and it's the hierarchy between teachers and students is really clear. And yeah, she says she enjoys it way more there. But the stereotype in Italy is that U.S. schools are there are more free time activities than classes. Like that's kind of the stereotype that people focus more like on baseball and football than actual academics.
We have pretty close.
What are a baseball team here? I'm not. It allows us to do a lot of different activities, and it allows us to spend a lot of free time that we have just sitting around. And well, it's pretty much a really fun sport.
How is the relationship between teachers and students? Like, do students have a say in their own classes? For example, is there this close type of connection which allows students to actually influence the way that their classes are run? Do they have the freedom to choose, or is it a very student-led approach?
Yeah, I think more or less the students have a very large say in their schedules.
With my experience, usually my teachers will, ask us how we feel, how the system runs in our classrooms, and if there's any problems, usually they try to, fix ways on how to make it more suitable for everyone and make it inclusive for all. So I feel that we as students, have a very, more close connection with our teachers because we want to feel comfortable and we want our teachers to realize that we are comfortable learning in an environment. So yeah, I feel that our relationship with our teachers and our staff are very close.
We have some teachers who are trying to bring about such changes because eventually, this is a very new school, so it's experimenting half the time with new methods, with new techniques, with new ways of actually engaging students into the community and also into the academic activities. But up until now, there have been, usually from the newer teachers, there have been these initiatives. And it's very interesting to see how we'll develop in the next few weeks, months, years, maybe, because the school has the potential to actually become a very flexible school because we're not that many, and also because the students who come here are with so diverse backgrounds that we could bring about something really interesting.
Mhm. What would you like to change about your school?
I was just about to
It's
start
okay.
like
Except
complimenting
for-
the school, but that wasn't really the question, so I don't know. I mean, it's a small
Well, remember,
school.
change is not always about criticism or about something wrong. It can be an addition or something you'd like more of too.
I would say probably more access to books because students they only get a certain time during the day and they can't come. Let's say they forget a book and they really need it, they have to wait till tomorrow, and that kills them because they can't get work done as quickly as other students that remembered their book.
I don't know, for me personally, most people disagree with me, but I think we should have more sport because at least for our year, we only have 2 lessons of sport twice every 3 weeks.
We only have Wi-Fi until midnight. We have to be in our residences at 9:40, 45. Yeah. So I mean, the opinions about it are quite different. I think that even in this room, not everyone agrees on something.
Right.
But maybe for some people, that's something that should change.
I want to jump to something. I want to talk about what your head of school, Rod Jemison, said. You know, where he said many students think they can change the world, but here our students believe they will change the world. I'd like to hear from both sides, but let's start with Japan. What would you change in the world?
Currently, we have a club which is well, recently we changed our name, but basically it's a sustainability club,
Right.
which is precisely that is what we're currently trying to change in the school, because we have certain issues with people not coming to meals or with so much food getting wasted because we have actual people who cook for us every day, 3 times a day, and who take care of us. But the amount of food that is being wasted is really absurd. And what we're currently trying to do is actually negotiate and actually see what the people in the kitchen are trying to do and how we could actually decrease that amount, because all of us actually realize how problematic this is. But we look forward to actually making these changes in the next few weeks, maybe, or maybe after the winter break. We haven't really established when, but we have a plan that is being developed.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, waste and managing that, you're able to identify the problem right there in school, but this is something, you know, that's a global problem. That is something that you can start to find solutions right there in school, and those solutions then can be applied to the world at large. So that's great. How about in the U.S.? Something else that you'd like to change in the world?
Well, seeing how we have a few model United Nations members in this classroom and this learning center as of now, a lot of us feel very passionate about different international topics. For me in particular, it's probably refugee situation in North Africa, in the Middle East, as well as those traveling currently to the current refugee crisis, which can be mostly contributed to the Arab Spring of 2012, started by Mohamed Bouazizi. The following movement led to, encourage a massive shift of power in a time in which unstable government and terrorism had begun to spread, the rise of the Islamic State of the Levant, or ISIS.
Right.
There was numerous governments that kind of brought forth much conflict and internal conflict, as well as a war assisted by outside powers that only prolonged it and has caused millions of deaths, millions of internal displacement, as well as many refugees.
So what can you do about it? What can we do about it?
Well, among the United Nations, we work in solving these crises and working on resolutions that would be possible in the real world, as well as what would make sense to do.
And we've been discussing them all. Maybe we haven't really touched on North Africa, but especially for the Middle East. And we are taking global politics forward, and many of us are actually really personally interested in these topics, so we read outside of school. But currently we have been discussing the issues in Syria, its background, and how this could be, how this could be resolved, because obviously there isn't a distinct solution to these issues. However, we have been discussing our own points of view because from different parts of the world there are different perspectives on it, and we have been looking into uh, how different societies take that and how they would probably respond.
Yeah.
I also think it's not only about the clubs and the information we can get in our classes, but also about interactions we can have with different people around the world. We have the opportunity of go to dinner and talk with someone who is from Libya, and she can tell you that 3 weeks ago ISIS went to her town and destroyed everything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of exposure that you can have on a different type of source that can give you information.
Right. So important, and that's so important about all of you and all of us having curious minds and being lifelong learners. I learn more about the world through Uber drivers in many cases than I do in other sources, because you just meet so many different people and interesting people that have all these experiences. And then the most important thing, though, is to always look for at least two other sources to corroborate the story, right? Never take the perspective of one perspective to form your own opinion. How much do you think that your individual voice really matters in your own elections? So let's start with the U.S. since it's election day. Do you think by the time you're able to go out and vote and cast a vote that your voice really makes a difference?
Absolutely, it's your civil duty to vote.
A lot of people don't vote, and so I think it's important that as many people vote as possible. I think it's important that people choose their political leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's a civil duty, but even more than a duty, it's a civil opportunity. It's an opportunity for all of us to affect some change. How do you? Because this varies from country to country. There are a lot of countries where people just simply do not feel that their vote makes any difference at all, and with good reason. Sometimes they're right.
I was gonna say that's so true for me because I come from Vietnam, which is a single party state. So we do have elections, but they're kind of just formalities, and so the results really don't matter. But the thing is, this is something that I've thought about, and I think that I would not trust my country with a democracy because the education system that we have is really not good enough for people to make really sound decisions about politics.
Really interesting perspective is whether you can trust a population that doesn't have access to good education to make a functional democracy. That's interesting. What do you guys think about that in the U.S., right? Because we think of ourselves as a democracy. We're really a republic. But what do you think of that concept of education? If everybody's doesn't have access to good education, should they be allowed to vote?
Well, you look at poor communities that have less effective education, even they have a say, because especially if you have someone who is receiving a lower education, it's usually by some other cause, and that cause is usually something they feel very powerful about, whether it's civil unrest, economic issues, or it could be anything, especially if you're looking at the ghettos of the U.S., for example.
Yeah.
And a lot of different perspectives can definitely are definitely important when it comes to voting, but I think it's also dangerous when people don't exactly know what they're voting in terms of education.
Yeah.
I think it's important that you know about who you're voting for, what you're voting for before you actually.
So, like for me, voting is like you can choose not to vote, but then I don't think you get to criticize or have an opinion about the politics because like you didn't contribute to that. Like for example, in my city, we have 250,000 inhabitants, but our mayor was elected with 1,500 votes, and he had 60, and that was like 60% of the vote. So basically, no one went to vote. And
I come from Colombia. For me, the recent history of my country is the history of how politics can go crazy if people don't go. So recently we have something like a referendum where people were voting for implementing a peace agreement between the guerrilla and the state. Later we have presidential elections, and later we have something to like something quite similar to a referendum to implement a proposal to fight against corruption. And I was deeply disappointed with my country being one of each opportunities. Actually, in every election, I think no more than 50% of the people actually voted. And the people who voted did it not because of rational arguments, but because of the influence of propaganda. So I completely agree with the idea that democracy is nothing, and it's a worthless system without good education for all the people.
Yeah.
I can corroborate that simply because in my country we are supposed to be functioning democracy, but the facts are that we have the same party in power for 3 mandates with the same prime minister who is doing virtually nothing in terms of development and in terms of actually bringing about transparency and cutting down corruption, which is basically my country is currently in a very, let's say, not, I mean, our economic development is going on because regardless of whether our politicians are skillful, it's just that we are in the European Union, so therefore we get subsidies and these things actually do bring about certain outcomes. However, in terms of social development, as Nick brought up, without education, what happens is that people are not aware of what right and left means. In my country, there's no such a thing as right and left because regardless of how each of the parties look at themselves and whatever ideologies they're seen to uphold, when it comes to practical implications, it doesn't really matter who you choose. So I personally feel that even if I do vote, the parties which might bring about a certain change will never get the majority of the vote.
In my country, I come from Australia, we don't really have much of an issue with people not voting because we just made it part of our law that if you don't vote, you get fined. Works pretty well. We have like 97% of people who vote.
Get fined.
And most of us have a pretty standard education system, so we all kind of know what we're doing. But lots of us tend to find that whoever we vote for, usually we end up with people who we just spend a lot of time complaining about anyway.
Yeah, there's some real connections that we made here, which is democracy, education, and we didn't talk much about it, but poverty is a real issue because in many cases, it is the impoverished who aren't receiving the education. And in certain countries, they are still being brought to the polls to make sure that they vote, whether they're getting a free meal or whether they're getting something that inspires them to vote. So, and that's corrupt. So these are the kinds of things that I think are very true to the mission of both of your schools and things that you can really work towards. There's so many issues, but when we start making the connections between these issues, such as voting, education, poverty, we could really see where major change can happen and where we can affect really positive things. I'm a big believer in change. I do believe one person can change the world. I do believe all of you can change the world. And I think it's great to keep these kinds of discussions going on.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. Domo arigato.
Come visit us. Come visit us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too.